Welcome to the Life Success and Legacy Podcast. We're glad you're here, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Hey, we want to welcome you all back to our next episode of the Life Success Legacy Podcast. My name is Chris Bay, and I am joined by the mics. Wow. Mike Kwong, Michael Crawford, Mike Everett. How are you all?
Awesome.
Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining in. Did a recent boot camp with had a large group. Actually, we had about 50 people on there, I believe. And Mike Crawford was kind enough to capture some of the questions that came through the when we do our boot camps. The first half of it, it's a 3-hour period, and the first hour and a half is us teaching. But the second hour and a half basically is simply Q&A, or as our Canadian friends would say, Q&R. In America, we answer it. In Canada, they respond. So we spend about an hour and a half doing Q&A. And one of the questions that came up, there's some corollaries to this, but we thought we'd jump into this today with the recording, is when does it get good? And Mike Crawford, you're the one who captured that question. What did they mean by when does it get good?
Well, I think that they were really just meaning like, how long am I paying into this thing before it's really capitalized? If I'm summarizing it in IBC terms, is how long am I capitalizing it before it's really like taken off and fully up in the sky?
It really goes back to how we introduce at the beginning of boot camps. We talk about the ruts in our brains, right? And the farmers driving down the tractor. And what are those ruts in our brains, Everett? What are the things that we've been taught and we look through these lenses typically? What are those ruts?
Well, number one, it would be rates of return. It would be percentages of things that we would borrow money on. It is, if we've got a bill, when can we stop paying on the bill? And how do I put as little as I can in this and then stop? So,
Well said.
It's so opposite of what we actually do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mike Kwong, when you're meeting with clients or you're doing a consult and you're talking with folks, and some of the questions they ask, the phrase we oftentimes hear is, when does it break even, right? But you've even broken that down into like, okay, exactly what do you mean by break even? Because there's different ways to look at that. Can you describe that, how you see that?
Yeah, sure. So, for most folks, the initial basic understanding or thinking of this is breaking even. I put so much money into this investment, or in this case, in the policy, which is not an investment, by the way. At what point does my cash value or, equity in this investment, right, match that in like amount of money I put in? So for so many years, I put in so much money, it's X amount. At what point is that cash value going to equal that and hopefully exceed it? So that's the first thing most people are thinking about, right? When do I get my money back, right?
Right.
But
yeah, I remember years ago we had a conversation. In fact, it's a podcast recording, I believe, one of our very early ones back in 2016 with Dr. Eric Benson. And I believe the way he phrased it was, if let's say you start a policy and you think it's, man, a couple of years down the road, you think this is the dumbest thing I've ever done, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said, hang on to it until about year 10 and you'll get every dollar out that you put in, right?
Oh, man.
So if we think of it as an investment, do you get all your dollars right away that you've put in? You do not. But that's where we talk about the 3 uses and using it for banking. So the first thing is break even is looking at when does my premium dollar, when I put it in, actually create more than at least that dollar or more of available cash value, right? That's one of the break evens. Yeah. What's one of the other break evens that they talk about?
Oh, well, another point, that I like to look at is, since the illustrations are shown on a yearly, basis, at which year does it become, net positive or geared positively? Because remember, this is like a machine, and we're putting inputs every year through the premiums. And then at what point does that input for the year net a result that's greater in growth of cash value?
Do you mean the total premium paid versus, just an annual? Okay,
That's right.
okay,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
with you now.
Yeah, and
That's the way I look at it all the time, right there.
exactly. Especially if your mind is centered on cash flow, which is,
Yep.
in the world it is, right? That's the most important thing. All the other things, are kind of secondary. When I have X amount of dollars and I have 3 options or 4 options to put my money towards, do I put it towards these where, I might get that return back after so long? Or do I put it in an IBC policy at year 5 or whatever it is, where boom, I put in $1 and there's more than $1 that I can use right there.
So there's that yearly dollar in premium and how much cash value you get access to. Then there is the cumulative premium, what we talk about as cost basis compared to what you have in cash value. Can someone break that down for us?
I've looked at that, I've looked at it for 18 and a half years now. And early on when I first got in, interest rates were great, investments were great. And so dividends were good, cash values were great. In the early days, you used to be able to do this 7 or 8, maybe 9 years at the max. And you would be in a positive situation. So that means total dollars in premiums would equal the cash value. But we've had a pretty serious number of years of downturn now. Investments are down, interest rates are down, everything's down, dividends are down. So that has been pushed out to year 11, 12, 13 now. Somewhere in that neighborhood, you're at a pretty close break-even point, depending on the age of the individual, the health of the individual, and the premium dollars that they're putting in. Because you got so many people that want to put as little as they can premium dollars wise, and they're wondering why it's not working the way it should. So
my policy that I got last year from Emeritus will take almost exactly 10 years to meet that number that you just said, where the number of premium dollars that I put in equals the cash value number. And that used to be 7 or 8. And to your point, with a more modern policy based off of the existing current interest rates, that's where it lands, is about 10 years.
Well, Crawford, you're just so dadgum young, it'll work a little quicker.
Yeah.
It's not the same for the 67-year-old guy.
That's fair.
One thing that's
but it's close.
One thing that's often missing in the conversation, I find, is that, the day your policy issues, you have a tremendous death benefit that's guaranteed for your family. Don't forget about that. Hello, that's like the whole cake. Sometimes I feel like you're missing the cake to focus on the icing, with the cash value, right?
Oh man,
there's a lot of value in that protection that's guaranteed for you tax-free and grows every year, by the way.
And I think that's a fair point. Like so many people in an investment conversation discuss, the return of that said investment, but it is just a single use asset at that point. Exactly. It is something you cannot touch or use along its growth or trajectory because you interrupt that compounding interest or you get penalized. I don't know why I said penalized. I meant penalized. But like you can't use that investment. But with life insurance, properly designed whole life insurance, you not only get to use that equity, that cash value, it doesn't affect the interest, the growth of the policy. You're not interrupting that compounding interest. We have a 13-minute video that discusses that Chris Bay did. That's amazing. And then thirdly, it is an and asset. Worst thing happens is you die and your family gets the death benefit.
Always
it's a win-win.
Put into it.
So when we look at these illustrations long term, I'm thinking in my mind over on the left-hand side, I've got my premium. And the way we typically design them, 40% of that premium is going into the base premium, 60% is going into the paid up edition rider. And we typically drop that PUA, that paid up edition rider off or decrease it significantly starting the 5th year. Part of that has to do with the MEC and keeping it from becoming a modified endowment contract. But if you just follow that, so that base premium would continue. So that's what's happening on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we've got the death benefit, we've got the cash value, and then we've got a column of this dividend, which we don't pay a lot of attention to it. It's important, but that dividend, as you go down through the years, it's also increasing.
Yeah.
And at some point, that dividend, and that's simply the company sharing the proceeds of their profits with us as policy owners, because we are working with mutual companies, so it's like a co-op. When we get that dividend, by the way, tax-free, it's a return of premium. If you've read Nelson's book, it's not a taxable event. When that dividend comes, at some point, it will actually be the same amount or more than the base premium, because it's just simply growing and growing and getting bigger and bigger. Now, we recommend, in fact, I can't think of anyone who doesn't do this, of all of our clients and all of us, we recommend that that dividend be turned into paid up death benefit, right?
Yeah.
Mike Kwong, I know you like to talk about that. Discuss why we want that dividend to go into the death benefit, because I could use it towards paying down a loan. I could pocket it. I could say, hey, send it to me.
Yeah.
I could use it towards premium, but why do we put it into death benefit?
Sure. So when you understand that the dividend comes out, right, it's paid as a dollar amount, let's say, when it's reinvested for IBC purposes to purchase you more death benefit and paid up addition dollars and cash value subsequently, the impact to your policy is actually much more than the dollars of the dividend that's dispersed to you. Okay, because there's this complicated process. The actuaries have figured it out, mathematically speaking, because this is well, I mean, it's priced out for so many years that the death benefit that it purchases you, right, is going to be multiples, maybe 3-4 times as much death benefit do you get for the same dollars of dividend. And that, of course, necessarily increases the cash value too, because remember, the real value, the cash value has been defined to me as nothing more than the present day value of that future death benefit.
Yeah.
So whenever your death benefit is increasing, your cash value necessarily increases, right? And that does, increase day, monthly, annually, because you're ever approaching that amount. But so just remember that when it's left in the policy to reinvest, the impact to your policy is much greater than the dividend itself.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Can I use an exact example?
Go for it.
So my very first policy in April of this year got a $1,238 dividend. Now, keep in mind, I have a large policy loan on this thing, but it still created a dividend of $1,238. It purchased $78.23
There you go.
in death benefit. It purchased, so the $1,200 purchased additional death benefit, but that's what my cash value increased by. So if you were just doing some quick math, 7,800 divided by 1,200, I'm doing quick math, doggone, that's about a 7% rate of return on your money.
Yep.
When do you want that to stop?
I'll add my own example, and mine's not
There
as
you
old
go.
as yours, but I started IBC, my very first policy 10 years ago last month. May 2013 was the issue date. And I started where I could. It was just below the example we always use. The base premium on that one was $38.30. So not even the $4,000 we often use. Okay, so keep that in mind.
Right.
Not a big policy, but at the 10-year mark, I made my payment, and the dividend, take a stab for a 3830, $3,830. What do you think that dividend was? 10 years.
$1,000.
Good. Well, come on, price is right. Let's go.
917.
Chris, what do you think?
1001.
Ooh, $2,718.
Whoa.
Okay. Now, here's the thing. If I took that as cash, you could divide that out, 3830 divided by 2718. That's like 70%. But remember, we don't take it as cash, right? It was left to reinvest to purchase more PUA, more death benefit. Okay.
Yeah.
And the death benefit growth was over 8,000. Okay, in death. And the net cash value growth year over year was 11,000. So quick question though, right? Of course, I was past the 4-year mark, but I did add some PUA into it. But I checked back to the PUA, and all told, with the PUA, it was $6,000, just over $6,000. So you put in 6,000, that's base and PUA. You net growth over 12 months, the same period, 11,000. Put that in the calculator. It's pretty
good.
Yeah.
Put that.
So you make me think a common question that we get from lots and lots of people. And again, it's the way we think, right? Is when can I stop paying premiums? When you hear that question from folks, how do you guys respond to that?
Well, I think I would use an example just like Kwong or Everett just gave, honestly, is like I would look at their illustration. If we're talking about a client X and they have a policy, a $10,000 annual premium policy, and they say, when does my premium end? And let's say they have an emeritus policy and that policy ends premium wise, you stop paying at age, 65, 75, sorry. So you stop paying that premium at 75. But here's the thing, at age 75, they paid their final $4,000, whatever that, if it was a $10,000 policy, and it grows by somewhere in the neighborhood of, 47, 8, $5,000, $200, whatever it is. Like, when do you want that to stop? If you can put $2,000 into a system that will then more than double, maybe even triple the amount of growth in your system, there isn't a product, tool, asset in the world that has that type of return long term, right? That didn't happen day one. That was in many cases, if you're in your 30s or 40s when you buy that policy, that's 30 years down the road, but you've gotten to use it the entire time. And then at the end, you still paid that premium at the age of 75, and it grew by 2.5 times the value.
Oh, it'd be way more than 2.5 times.
Right, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
even worst case, 2.5.
What I always show is, on the illustrations, oftentimes something magical happens at year 5. We know this, right? Once you're done capitalizing it, that positively geared effect takes over. Where at that 10,000 with a $4,000 base premium, that $4,000 going in at year 5 will often net you $4,500, $4,600 of growth. Okay. Well, I always use this example. If you're at an ATM and this ATM is a magical one that takes $4, every $4 you put in kicks back $4.50, $4.60. Would you want to stop putting money in that? Or would you want to put more or have as many ATMs like I do, that you could have?
I mean, that's an excellent example of how franchising works using an ATM.
That's right.
I love that model. Like that's analogies are something that I use a lot. And sometimes my wife rolls her eyes because I use analogies a lot. But I think that sometimes when you're talking about a system like infinite banking, it's not a complex process, but it is hard for us to shift our mind. And so using an analogy like that ATM, like it's something we can all relate to. We've all been to the ATM, even if it's been a minute, we all remember punch, 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 you put in the number, So, I think that the thing that we as agents and as coaches, we try to do to our clients is help them bring it to what Nelson always said, the you and me level, and get it out so that people can comprehend it and consume it and really process it effectively.
Mike Crawford, you brought up something when you're talking about the Meritas policy. I think you said paid up at 75. Not all companies have them paid up, and what we mean by that is no more premium is required. Not all companies have them paid up at the same.
Yeah.
There's varying. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Nelson talked even in his book, a lot of the examples he used were paid up at 100, I think. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was 100. I was just looking at MTL. MTL's paid up at 90. Emeritus is paid up at 75 for the policy that we use. Now, to answer a side question on that is each policy design, each company has multiple whole life products. Each of them are designed for a specific purpose, and we use the ones that are designed or that work best for infinite banking. And in this case, like Emeritus, it pays up at age 75. But ultimately, I think that the real reason for that has a lot to do with something Mike Kwong has said before, and I'll kind of try to butcher it, but he basically said that, the faster you can pay that premium, or towards that premium dollar, the faster the cash, the faster the death benefit grows, right? Because it's a shorter time period that you're paying that premium from start to finish in terms of number of years. And so I think that, with the Emeritus policy that we use, that was honestly designed by, Nelson Nash practitioners working with Emeritus, that policy is geared for long-term cash growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of them are paid up at 75. Some are paid up at 90.
100. Yeah.
So it just depends on how the company designed it, what the purpose was and all that. There's one more term before we wrap up. There's one more term, and that is when it endows.
There you go.
Mike Everett, can you talk about what does it mean to endow and what that means with a policy?
Basically, your cash value equals the death benefit. If you want to get to the simple term, the cash value equals the death benefit. That's what because if you go back to the old actuaries, what they did was they figured the lifespan of a person was 100 years. If they paid that premium, the cash value would equal the death benefit. Obviously, with the way people's lives are living longer, people are taking better care of themselves, I think. And so they're pushing those endowments out a little further now.
Yeah.
Which 6 of one, half a dozen the other, because of how policies are now designed, especially with IBC. It takes a minute to get to that place. That's because we're using those dollars all along their lives.
Yeah.
But my goodness.
Yeah, so endowed, typically it's going to be, at least right now in a lot of the policies, it's 121 years old.
Yep.
Right. So we always joke. I got a client and I was joking with her and I said, if you reach 121, the company's going to come to you and they're going to say, old lady, leave us alone. They're going to write you a check for the death benefit and it's all yours. Just leave us alone. Go away.
Go away.
Right.
Oh man.
But yeah, I mean, when you think about those two columns, you've got your death benefit and you've got your cash surrender value. What's happening is the death benefit is a much bigger number. Yeah. But that cash surrender value, it is catching up to it all along the way until they actually equal each other. And when they do, that is what it means it's endowed. And they're simply going to write you a check for the death benefit at that point. If
when you and I started working together 8 or 9 years ago, and you would say that kind of stuff about older people, I thought, man, those are some crabby people. But now I am one of those crabby people.
It was 11 years ago, Everett.
Well, 6, 8, 9, 11.
Time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it?
I'm telling you.
Good stuff, guys. So we talked about, the general idea of when do our policies break even. We broke down the different ways that people think about that. We talked about why would you want to stop paying premiums?
Yeah.
But a large percentage of our clients actually use loans against their policies to pay premiums. If you can use new money, it's even better, of course. But a lot of our clients, the way we design the policies, if they're an
Yeah.
honest banker, they don't have to worry about their premium coming up with new money starting second year.
Yep.
We talked about the different types of policies and when they can be paid up, and then we talked about when a policy endows. So good stuff, gentlemen. Thanks for joining in on this podcast. To our listeners, check us out at lifesuccesslegacy.com. Give us a thumbs up, comment. If you have a topic you'd like for us to discuss, please send that to us so we can share that information and discuss it. And we look forward to you joining us next time on the Life Success Legacy podcast. Thanks, guys. See ya.